Hello, and welcome to what I'm hoping is going to be a sort of semi-regular series that I'm going to do on YouTube or Facebook. Just that we'll be kind of talking about a variety of classic and old games on a series of platforms, mostly 8-bit, that I have particular memories of growing up. So kind of talking about how I first encountered certain games and my memories of them and any specific facts or knowledge that I've picked up over the years about them. My background is that I run a project called The Games That Weren't, which looks at unreleased games across a series of platforms. Primarily we sort of try and preserve Commodore 64 software that was never released. But I'm massively into retro gaming as well, and I love to kind of look back and play particular games from my childhood as well as new games that are coming out now for retro platforms. In particular, my main platforms are like the Atari VCS, the Commodore VIC-20 and the Commodore 64, as well as the Master System. So I'm hoping to kind of cover a variety of those platforms over time, and just be able to use this as an outlet to kind of share any information that I have, and just give me a way of kind of like boring someone else other than my wife and daughter, who unfortunately have had to put up with me for years, sort of rabbiting on about how great certain old games are and watching them fall asleep. If I have the same effect on you, then I apologise. I just hope that maybe I'll save you some money on sleeping tablets or something like that. So what I'm aiming to do is nothing spectacular. I mean, I'm literally using slideshows and capturing from WinVice or other emulators, and I'm just going to kind of talk through stuff. Really, there's nothing professional or flashy. I don't plan to be anything big on YouTube at all. This is, even if I get 2 people viewing what I'm doing, then fair enough. This is something for me to do, mostly on a personal level, really, to kind of have an outlet of kind of talking about this kind of thing. And if anyone is interested, then you know it's there if you want to see it. If you don't, then you can just turn off. It's completely up to you. But after the long introduction, the first thing I kind of want to cover for the first episode is to kind of talk about a budget game that I have very fond memories of playing, called Spike in Transylvania, which you can see on the screen here. This is a budget game that was released back in 1991 by Codemasters, who at the time, before they did all like the dirt racing games that you see today, they were primarily a budget company that was started by Richard and David Darling, who originally did budget titles for the likes of Mastertronic and also their own sort of work for other companies, such as their own label Galactic. But what they did eventually is, after working for Mastertronic for a couple of years, they decided to go their own way, and the money they made from Mastertronic, they started up Codemasters and released these original games, such as like BMX Racer and Pub Trivia and various others, on their kind of $2.99 or $1.99 label. I think it was $1.99 when they very first started out. Eventually that kind of grew to $2.99 and then to $3.99 when I was buying games. But the good thing about Codemasters is that usually budget titles were re-releases, so they were like, you used to get full price games at like $9.99 or a bit more. And if you couldn't afford that, you could wait a couple of months, and a budget company would often take that game and release it on their budget label to get some extra money out of it. Whereas Codemasters, they would, most of their stuff was original. It was never seen before, and that's why I kind of enjoyed a lot of their games. In particular, I was a massive fan of Dizzy and the Dizzy series of games, and used to get a lot of fun from sort of playing those kind of exploration games. You have to solve puzzles. And the game that I'm covering today, Spike in Transylvania, is one of those kind of games. It's a flick screen sort of game where you have to kind of pick up objects, take them to certain rooms and drop them in a particular order to be able to progress to the next screen and that kind of thing. The added addition to this game is that you have to kind of save your captured shipmates as well, and you have to kind of unlock them from the dungeons to kind of get them free and then escape together. This particular game wasn't sort of discovered in the shops by random or anything like that, like most of the Codemasters stuff was for me. This was one of the first games I picked up based on reputation and based on a review in a magazine. So a couple of months before, back in 1991, over the summertime, I I found this game, CJ's Elephant Antics, which was another Codemasters title, which was it's basically a clone of New Zealand Story. So if I show you some of the screens, you can see it's kind of very visually familiar to the game, and there's a good reason for that. Originally, this was going to be a New Zealand Story conversion for Ocean, and what happened was Ocean decided suddenly to bring the development in-house to finish off for reasons which are not quite yet known. So basically what happened was, after that point, the developers who worked on that game, they made a decision to kind of separate off and do their own thing. At the time they were working for a company called Choice Software. So this was David Clark, who was on code, you had John Smith, now known as John Temples, who did the graphics work, and you had Ashley Hogg, who did all the audio work. I don't know if Ashley Hogg was at Choice at the time, but he was kind of friends with David and John, and the three of them, after things with New Zealand Story fell through, they decided that they could do development stuff on their own and come up with their own games and stuff. And what they did, they took the New Zealand Story template or code base and they kind of remapped it and put this elephant character called CJ onto it, and changed the graphics and the maps, and come up with this story where you have to save your family. And it was great. Most of the Codemasters stuff is sort of ranges from average to pretty good, but you could tell most often that some of the games were budget sort of quality, whereas this felt like a full price game and had a lot of quality throughout. You had quite a few levels which were quite distinctive and different, and it was all packed within a single load as well. So it stood out like a sore thumb. When I picked this game up, I was completely blown away by it, and was craving for more. It kind of saw the Genesis credits on the title screen and thought, you know, what have these guys done? What other things have these guys done? I started looking around. Obviously there's no internet then, so you can't search these guys up, so you're kind of relying on magazines and just discovering games by chance. And it was by chance that in a second-hand shop I picked up a loose Zap Megatape, which was a cover mount game that was given away on Zap 64, and I picked up this Megatape 18, which was always great to pick up because you had a range of games on there. You had a couple of full games and some demos, and this one you had Jeff Minter's Iridius Alpha, and you had Steel and Shot Away on there, all full games, and you had this previously unseen Genesis game which just stood out for me because I saw the Genesis name and thought, oh, this is the CJ guys, and it was this game called Spellcast. So I didn't have any screenshots or the magazine at the time, and I didn't know what it was, but essentially if you had the magazine you would see that it was this abandoned platform sort of sword and sorcery game that Genesis Software were working on. I think at the time they were developing it at Choice and took it with them when they left to do Genesis Software. I'm not entirely sure, that might not be the case. Thinking it's possible they might have been working on the game in the background whilst they were at Choice in their own spare time, but it was always going to be a Genesis Software game and something they hoped to pitch to companies. For some bizarre reason, no one picked it up. It's a great little game. It's sort of like a cross between sort of Castlevania and Ghouls and Ghosts. Yeah, there's even like a sort of Ghosts and Goblins, Ghouls and Ghosts sort of intro style screen on the title screen, which you can hopefully see here, which shows you like a map of the different parts. So you got like the forest, and then you got the castle or kind of town area and graveyard, and then finally this big castle at the end. And that was the kind of way they were going with the game, but unfortunately no one picked it up, even though it was really nice and solid and quite playable, and I was really impressed with it. So by that point, after playing these two games, I was completely in love with what Genesis Software were developing, so I was kind of looking out for anything these guys were doing. I was hoping to see more from them. It's kind of like when you kept going back to Ocean Software in the 90s because their games output was pretty decent, like Batman the movie and all that kind of thing, and Genesis was one of these development groups. You knew that everything they produced would be really good. Around the same time I started buying computer magazines, and one in particular I started buying was Commodore Format. Started from about issue 11. The main thing that drew me to the magazine was the cover mount, that you used to get on the front. So you used to get like a tape, sellotape to the front with a couple of full games and a bunch of demos, and the price would literally just be £2.20 or about £2, and you get that whole tape full of games and a magazine attached to it as well, which was great value for money. And for someone on limited pocket money like myself, it was an ideal way of kind of picking up a games collection really quickly with limited funds. But the content was pretty good as well, and one particular section that I really liked was the Roger Frames buys budget games section. So this pre-internet days was like a bible really for anyone who was into buying sort of budget titles. Roger Frames was this cartoon character who had this comic strip in every issue, which was related to one of the main games they were covering. So here you got this comic strip which ties into the Untouchables, and each month you'd see like a series of Ocean Software games that have been re-released under their Hit Squad label, or Kicks titles, which are US Gold titles, and then obviously your Codemaster titles as well. And this particular issue, they had Spike and Transylvania, and straight away this popped out and stood out like a sore thumb for me, because it was a brand new game. It's something I hadn't seen before, but it also had that distinctive sort of style from Genesis. So I kind of knew straight away that this was a Genesis title just by looking at it. So I knew that I had to get this game based on playing CJ and Spellcast. And it got quite a good review as well. So it got 81%, and I think it got like 91% in Zap. And it describes a game like an adventure game like Dizzy, where you pick up objects and have to kind of take in certain screens to get past and that kind of thing. And it was right up my street. I was massively into Dizzy at the time, and sort of played Fantasy World Dizzy and Magic Land Dizzy to death. So I was sold. So it had all those things. Plus it was a budget game. It's $3.99. I could save up relatively quickly and go and buy it. So I remember sort of cobbling together as much money as I could, whatever I had, and then also sort of begging my dad for an extra £1 or £2, so then I could go down to so I could actually go down to John Menzies. So we had a John Menzies in Dover, and this is a photo from Facebook, which shows you John Menzies that I would have gone down to as a kid. And in the back there used to be a whole game section with all like Commodore 64 Spectrum and Amstrad stuff. So I rushed down here with my dad, desperate to pick up a copy of the game, and luckily they had plenty in because it had just come out, so it had it on all the formats. And handed over my money with massive anticipation, and just could not wait to get home. The first thing that you notice straight away is the cover. The main character is actually very different to actually what features in the main game. You'll see in a moment when I show you that how that's very different. But also the title doesn't quite add up either. But I remember getting out of John Menzies. I think me and my dad went to somewhere like McDonald's, when McDonald's used to be like a massive treat at the time. Go and sit in there and take the tape and the inlay out and have a read through, read the story, look at the screenshots on the back and get really excited, and then be desperately trying to get back home so I could load it up. And wasn't disappointed at all. So just going to show you now the game itself. So this is the loading screen, so as you would have loaded it from tape, and this is what you would have been presented with. Here you notice it's called Spike the Viking, which is completely different to what's on the cover. But also additionally you've got the main character here, which is not only is it nothing like the character on the cover, but also looks very distinctively like Hagar the Horrible, the comic strip character. And it's exactly the same in the main game as well. So if I load that up, so I think the reason what happened was they the Genesis guys designed it with Hagar the Horrible as the main character. What was coming up about a year later was an official Hagar the Horrible game by Kingsoft, which was only released I think in parts of Europe. The English version never got released. I think the company went under before it could be finished, but it's possible that Codemasters were aware that there was a Hagar the Horrible game coming, or they were just scared of getting a license infringement, so they just changed the cover art instead so it wasn't so obvious. Okay. So this is the main game that you get as you load up, and the main thing, once it comes around back to a title screen, is that the title is completely different again. So on the title screen it's called Spiky in Transylvania, so complete confusion over actually what the title was meant to be, but I've always called it Spike in Transylvania. Anyway, if I kick straight into the game. So the main distinctive thing that you see is you've got this sort of semi-isometric sort of view, or isometric, I think it's probably just is isometric, which is very similar to the Ultimate Play the Game games that were released on the Commodore 64 and which were exclusive to the platform. So there was games such as Entombed and Star for Carnif which had this same kind of viewpoint. And I played them at the time and never really got into them because the puzzles were a little bit too tricky for my small brain at the time. I was only about 7 or 8 and didn't understand a lot of puzzles back then. But for this particular game, the puzzles were aimed more for my level, so it was very easy to kind of figure out. So you're stuck in this room here. You've got a pair of gloves and a doorknob, and you've got a door with no sort of doorknob, so you probably figure out that you can go up to the doorknob and open the door. So fairly straightforward so far. But it's got this lovely style about it throughout. So John has done some fantastic graphics, making full use of the sort of 255 characters he had available. And I actually think looking a lot better than the Ultimate Play the Game titles as well that were released. So it's more, this is kind of like a full colour Dizzy game. It's a similar kind of flick screen idea where you have to go around different screens and pick up various objects and then drop them in certain places. You've got things like a chicken to pick up if you run out of energy. If you touch like the rats, your energy bar depletes. You've got these poison apples dotted around. If you touch them, you'll deplete your energy as well. And as you can see here, we go to certain rooms and you'll find objects like you would do in, say, Dizzy. The major difference with Dizzy, apart from the use of full colour, is that you have this large inventory system, which is very nice to use. You hold down the fire button and move left and right, and you have up to 6 sort of placement places that you can pick things up and put them. A lot more than what the Dizzy games would hold. In Dizzy it was often about 2 or 3 items that you could hold, and it meant you had to carefully plan what to take while travelling between 2 ends of the map. If you forgot one item, you'd have to travel often all the way to the other end of the map to get that object and then back again, and you'd spend most of the game kind of doing that kind of thing. Whereas in here you've got a lot more you can carry, there's a bit less running around compared to Dizzy. Okay, this is one of the characters who we can interact with a similar sort of Dizzy prompt that comes up. Of course, Dizzy wasn't the only game that did these prompts. You had those kind of dialogues in the likes of the Stormbringer and other games, the night games that were released, the Magic Night games. There's another character we interact with. This one is not going to let us in. The only downside to being able to hold so many objects is that, in theory, it means that you can complete this game a lot more quickly compared to others. You've got less running around to do as a result. But it's still quite a reasonably sized game regardless of that anyway. Okay, let's try and avoid this spit in the head, which I'm doing really bad. I've just got the apple as well. So I'm playing this on WinVice at the moment, and I'm using the numpad, which is a bit of a pain, so this might not actually become a long play for the game. Okay, so you see this wizard, and we have to bring in a bunch of ingredients to make something. So as well as the decent graphics throughout, there's also some pretty decent music by Ashley Hogg as well. And his music and sound effects have always been really strong in all of the games. The CJ tunes in particular are very good. The Spellcast tunes, he uses samples on the title screen which are really good. But if you get bored of the music, you've got sound effects option in there as well you can switch to, which gives you some basic but effective sound effects. Okay, so we've just picked up one of the ingredients, at least, and we've got a crucifix which we'll need to kind of get rid of the ghosts on some of the screens. So I'm just going to offload that for now. Okay, so the switch we flicked earlier got rid of the spikes. This is a bit of a pain in the backside part. So here, the guards are flashing different colours, so these particular ones we can't interact with them at all, we have to wait for them to go past. If we touch them, then we lose our energy bar. Save up the chicken for now. Okay, so the tricky bit is going to be trying to get that key and the chicken up there. It's going to be a definite energy drainer because there's limited sort of room to move on that platform at the top. Oh, I'm definitely not going to make it now because I've just completely messed that up. Yep. Okay, these bats here are a massive pain in the backside. See if that rat moves out of the way for me. You can see I can't really move up and down that much on here at all. So I'm try and not get the chicken just yet. Okay, so what I need to be careful of here is that there's these bats that unfortunately start straight where I am. I mean, even if I don't complete it today, this game is relatively straightforward to play. It won't. Most hardened games players won't have any problems at all getting through it. But it's still a lot of fun to play. And I mean, if you have younger children who are into this kind of thing, you want to show them like some of the adventure-style games we used to play. Want something a bit more straightforward than Dizzy, then this is definitely one to try. The thing that you'll know, hopefully we're going to see with this game, is that it's possible to complete it without actually solving all of the puzzles. Which I don't know if it's a deliberate thing, or if it was kind of done, if it's actually a glitch in the game. So one of the things we've got to do at the moment is we've got these keys that we've been collecting up, and we need to kind of open up the dungeons. So this one we can't open because we've got a guard who's guarding it. Okay, so that switch has just put that platform on for us. I don't think I've got any space to pick that torch up. Okay, so this one we can open. So for one of the comrades, when we go to save them, that screen flashes up twice, and I'm wondering if what that does is register the saving twice by accident. Because what happens is a whole chunk of the game that you can skip out without actually ever exploring or getting all of the comrades out. So you actually end up completing the game, leaving one of your comrades behind. And I mean, that's possibly one to have a dig around in the code to see if that was the case. Okay, so I haven't found it just yet. Oh. That did not go well, forgot about this room. Right. That's why we need the crucifix. So if I go back into that room now with that crucifix down, the ghost will go straight away. I've got to be careful here as well, because I don't think I've got a key anyway, so let's come back. Right, struggling to find a key. So this guy I can't do much with at the moment, he's just asking for a drink, which we don't have. I have to go back and find a key from somewhere. completely leave. So following this game, the Genesis guys went on to do another CJ title, which was CJ in the USA. And unfortunately, I remember picking up the game and I didn't really enjoy it as much as the original CJ's Elephant Antics. I don't know, the maps felt... I don't know, it's hard to explain. It just didn't feel natural when you were playing through it. They were very kind of tightly packed. There was some cheap deaths in it in particular, and I just didn't enjoy it really. Maybe it was a bit too similar to the first game as well, and the reason for that apparently was that the Genesis guys were asked to kind of almost demanded to produce that game, whereas they didn't really want it. They wanted to do something else, I think, or they wanted to do another title first at least, or something different. The Codemasters kind of got them to do it, and as a result it was kind of rushed really to try and get it out of the way and do it as quick as possible, and it kind of suffered as a result really. It was a bit of a shame, and it probably resulted in CJ in Space being cancelled in the end, because no doubt Genesis Software would have done that game as well, but they never actually got to do it at all. After kind of doing CJ in Space, the guys kind of went on together to do Nobby the Aardvark, which I'll kind of show afterwards. Oh, here we go, this is a pain in the backside. Right, I think I'm about to completely lose all my lives now. Okay, see then, there was 2 flicks of the screen there, so I'm wondering if that registers 2 comrades being saved. Right, try not to lose that life because I'm a goner. Yeah, there we go. We need that crucifix for the start as well. Yeah, so the guys, they did Nobby the Aardvark, which was like a full price game for Thalamus, which combined all of the skills they'd learned on the likes of Spike and also CJ's Elephant Antics. You had like a sort of CJ's Elephant Antics style level with a larger character, and you could fly in a hot air balloon on later levels and go underwater and that kind of thing. It was a massive game, got a gold medal award in Zap 64. Unfortunately didn't get released until a little bit later. I think it got caught up in Newsfield going under at the time, so there was a delay on when Thalamus was getting picked up again for it actually being properly released. So, but luckily a lot of people can enjoy it now on the new C64 Mini that's been released, as it's a packing game that you can find on there. It's a decent game. I didn't quite get into it compared to the earlier Genesis stuff. It's still definitely worth checking out. I found it a bit too hard. I struggled to get off the first level. It's probably just my poor games playing, than it being a bad game or anything like that. But Ashley Hogg and John Temples, they stayed on at Codemasters and they did a bunch of games, or helped out in a bunch of games for Codemasters. So John in particular did a lot of art, contributed art for titles such as like Stuntman Seymour and DJ Puff, which actually were sort of CJ clones in a funny way. And he did quite a few loading screens as well. And Ashley Hogg, I think he did a bit of audio work, and I think he stayed on at Codemasters as well after that point. Okay, so I've got all the ingredients here and I need to drop them in the cauldron. There we go. So he's made us a tie. Okay, so before I forget, I'm going to get the crucifix ready because I need to get past the ghost screen now. So the tie we're going to take back to one of the screens we haven't seen yet. And the ploughman's lunch as well. So we can leave that crucifix there now, we don't need to go back to the other screen. It's going to be a bit tight, we're kind of getting near the end already, so you can see possibly with the larger amount of items that we have, we can get through the game a lot quicker. So we've given Farmer Giles the lunch, so we've now got a pair of wellies. So we can now get through the mud. But before we do that, we're going to go and solve the puzzle with a tie. So you can find a turkey as well. Okay. Save that maybe. Hopefully get through air without dying. Okay. So he will now let us in. And we have a tie. We've got a bottle of drink down here to collect. So when I playing these kind of games as a kid, the big thing for me was the excitement of getting to a new screen. It was seeing something new and being able to progress. So when playing this game originally, I could never get past the guy who needed you to wear a tie. So I was always getting stuck here and never knew what to do. This was later on in the game. But I wanted to see what was beyond this point. And when you finally got the tie and realised that's what you had to do, it was the excitement of seeing what was beyond and what was in these screens was really cool. I mean, looking back now, it's just a new screen using some of the graphics, but as a kid there was that kind of strange excitement about discovering new things in games and hidden things and seeing what was beyond, that kind of thing. It's a hard thing to explain. Okay, so here what we're going to do is I'm going to show you part of the level which you don't actually need to visit at all. So we're going to drop the cannonball onto the cannon and we use the torch to destroy that rock. There we go. But I don't think I've got the bone. No, so I can't get past the dog. But this is a screen you don't need to see at all. That torch as well, I always kind of get mixed up with Magic Land Dizzy, because in Magic Land Dizzy is a very similar puzzle where you have to get a certain set of ingredients and then drop them into a cauldron, which Blender the Witch in that game. With that game, once you drop the ingredients into the cauldron, you have to use a torch to light it, so it kind of mixes the spell up. And I sometimes used to take that torch to the mixing cauldron in this game, thinking, oh, well, am I meant to kind of take it here, and always getting mixed up between the games. But it's interesting now, like, there's kind of similar ideas that like go across the different games, especially the Codemasters ones and different borrowed themes. So, I mean, you've got the puzzle element in Magic Land Dizzy in this game, but then you've got the CJ games also were used as inspiration for like the Stuntman Seymour and DJ Puff, which were essentially the same engine just with different graphics over the top. Okay, so we can now, with the wellies, get over the muddy puddle. We've got a bone that we could give to that dog. But as you'll see in a moment, we won't ever have to use that at all. Okay, so we now just need to, I think we've just got one more person to save. I think he's the guy who wants a drink. So the thing we don't see is getting past that dog with the bone, there's a set of headphones you can pick up. So you give that to the guard who says it's a bit quiet, and that releases another comrade. I'm pretty sure. Just do this one, then we're done. So there you go, there's a whole little chunk of game which we don't have to touch at all. And we freed the rebels. Okay, so really quickly, put it into SFX mode so you can get a quick hear of that. Just going to show the death scene, which for a kids game, is something you wouldn't expect to see, but it kind of snuck through. I'm going to go somewhere where there's lots of the mice so I can die quickly, and I'm going to speed this up. Okay, bear with me. There we go. There you go, a slightly graphic sort of ending to the game, which I didn't mind as a kid. I've seen worse stuff. What's interesting about that part as well, so before I forget, is one of the things I used to do just out of interest was kind of hack into games with an action replay cartridge and see if there was any sort of hidden messages or stuff that was left behind. And in this game there's a couple of unused animation sprites that show you, like when the head popping off, it shows you like a blood explosion, which is quite cool. But they never used it. Maybe Codemasters said that was a bit too much, who knows. Okay, so that is a complete run through, which I'm quite surprised I managed to do, of Spike in Transylvania. Just to conclude really quickly, was to show you Nobby the Aardvark. So this is what they kind of did next as a group, and I think this is like the last proper Genesis game that they all did together, and certainly on the C64, which was a massive shame. It's like I was really hoping that they would have done CJ in space, or maybe even finished off Spellcast. But as you can see, this it's got a very sort of similar style. It's a CJ the Elephant style platforming level, and then you had like a section, similar kind of map, but instead flying a balloon around. But it was kind of very much more polished up compared to the Codemaster games. It was multi-load, everything was larger and bigger and brighter, and it was well worth the gold medal that it received. As I said, unfortunately didn't fully get into this game as much as the others. I didn't get hold of the game till very late. Had I picked it up at the time, then I think I would have appreciated it a lot more. But it certainly has that Genesis software feel to it, and is definitely worth seeking out if you haven't played it before. So that's it. I hope that maybe compared to my wife and daughter you're still awake. I hope that you've enjoyed like the first episode, and something more like this for other games will kind of interest you. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. I might maybe do something different like a Vic 20 game, which might not be as long, but I hope you enjoy it and hope to see you next time.